For the same $120, Costco can give you either a stack of ready-cut New York strips or an entire strip loin that turns into even more steaks once you do the cutting yourself. That sounds almost too simple, but it is exactly why whole primals matter. The store charges you for convenience every time somebody else opens the package, trims the meat, portions the steaks, and puts them on a tray. If you're willing to do that work yourself, you keep that money in your pocket, and you get another advantage most people never think about. You decide how thick every steak will be. My name is Marcus, and after decades around butcher blocks, I learned that one of the easiest ways to make beef more affordable is to stop buying every steak as an individual finished product. Today, I'm going to take a whole strip loin from Costco that cost $120, cut it into New York strips, trim them the way I would behind a counter, and compare the final number directly against $120 of grocery store steaks. We are not guessing. We are going to count them at the end. And along the way, I will show you the small details that matter, how to keep your board from moving, what knife works, why that red liquid in the package is not blood, where top sirloin begins to sneak into the strip loin, how much fat I leave on a New York strip, and the one buying mistake that can make you pay strip steak money for a piece of sirloin. The whole lesson is really this. The more work you can safely do yourself, the less you have to pay someone else to do it for you. Before we make the first cut, subscribe to the channel if you want more of the old butcher counter knowledge that helps you buy better meat, portion it properly, and keep more money in your pocket. I want to show you the jobs that look intimidating through the plastic, but become simple once somebody explains where the knife goes and why. If learning to cut one whole primal can put several extra steaks in your freezer for the same money, that is the kind of skill worth keeping. Now let us set up the station properly because safe, clean work starts before the meat comes out of the bag. You need a large cutting board. Mine is roughly 20 inches by 15 inches, but the exact size is less important than having enough room for the whole strip loin without half of it hanging over the edge. Put a damp paper towel underneath the board so it grips the counter and stays solid while you cut. A sliding cutting board and a sharp knife are a bad combination. Next comes the knife. A long breaking knife around 10 inches works beautifully because the length lets you make one clean slicing motion through a thick piece of meat. And if you do not own one, use the longest sharp chef's knife you have. Sharp matters more than fancy. A dull knife makes you push harder, saw more, and lose control. Keep a bowl nearby for trim and scraps and a sheet tray for the finished steaks. Gloves are optional depending on your comfort level with raw meat, but paper towels are not. You are going to need more than you think. I lay down a bed of paper towels before opening the package because a whole strip loin in cryovac usually carries a fair amount of liquid. That red liquid is not blood. It is mostly water mixed with myoglobin, the oxygen-binding protein and muscle that gives meat much of its red color. I like to keep as much of that liquid inside the plastic as possible because it makes cleanup easier. Instead of wrestling the roast out through one small opening, I lay the package flat and cut a large X across the top of the plastic. Then I peel it open, lift the strip loin straight onto the towels, and leave most of the liquid behind. And a few more towels on top help dry the surface so the meat does not slide around under the knife. This particular loin weighed a little over 12 pounds. The first thing I do is square the end. You want the first steak to have a clean, even face, so trim off only enough meat to make that end straight. Do not throw that little piece away. That is what butchers call the snack tax. Toss it in a pan later and eat it while you finish packaging the rest. Tell me in the comments if you are the person who cooks the trim immediately or saves every scrap for another meal, because every butcher develops a habit there. Once the end is square, look at the top of the loin and get your knife just underneath the outer fat layer. The motion matters. I start the blade at the top, draw it back in one long stroke, and lift my elbow slightly so the tip finishes the cut instead of forcing me to saw. You want a straight face from top to bottom. Long, controlled strokes give you cleaner steaks than short, nervous chopping. But before I cut the whole loin, we need to make the comparison fair. The grocery store New York strips we are testing against are about 1 inch thick, so I'm going to cut this loin to the same thickness. I will admit that pains me a little because I like a New York strip thick. If I am cooking for myself, I would rather have a steak closer to 1.5 inches or even 2 inches because thicker meat gives you more control over the interior. But today, the point is not my preference. The point is value at equal thickness. This is also where cutting your own becomes better than simple savings. You can customize the whole piece. Want thin steaks for quick weeknight cooking? Cut them thinner. Want thick steaks for reverse searing? Cut them thick. Want to leave a section whole and roast it like a strip roast? You can do that too. The primal belongs to you now. The butcher counter no longer decides every portion. And if you want exact 1 inch steaks, there is nothing wrong with using a tape measure. I normally cut by eye, but for a direct comparison, I lay the measure alongside the board and make a small score at every inch. Those marks become guides, not deep cuts. Then I start slicing. Set the blade into the score, draw it through in one long motion, and let the knife do the work. Do not force straight down like you are splitting firewood. A slicing knife is designed to travel. After each steak comes off, set it on the sheet tray and look back at the face of the loin. If you are drifting thicker on one side, correct yourself on the next cut. That small discipline matters because a 12-pound loin gives you plenty of opportunities to slowly turn 1-inch steaks into 1.25-inch steaks without noticing. And if you are doing this for your own freezer rather than a comparison, that is not necessarily a problem. The beauty is that you get to choose. Halfway through the loin, there is an anatomical detail I want you to notice because it can save you money when you buy pre-cut strips. The strip loin sits right beside the sirloin on the animal. As you move toward the sirloin end, a small round section of top sirloin begins appearing in the steak. You will see it as a separate little muscle divided by a seam. There is nothing wrong with top sirloin. I like top sirloin. But if you are standing at a grocery case paying New York strip price, you should know when part of your steak is actually sirloin. That last section of the loin is perfectly good eating when you cut the primal yourself because you already paid the whole primal price. The problem is when a store sells that same end steak at full strip steak price and you do not know what you are looking at. That is the kind of detail an old butcher used to point out across the counter. Look for a clean single strip muscle when you are choosing individual New York strips, especially if the price is high. Once all the steaks are portioned, we go back and trim. This is where customization matters again. You can leave more fat, remove more fat, square the edges aggressively, or keep the trim minimal. I am going to show you the way I would finish them for a clean butcher case presentation without wasting good meat. The first thing I look for is the small translucent connective tissue near the tip. Stretch it slightly with your fingers and slide the knife underneath it. That membrane is chewy and does not improve because you paid more for the steak, so I remove it. Then I inspect the fat cap along the top. Around 1/4 inch is a good practical amount for a New York strip. You want enough fat to render and flavor the edge without leaving a huge white band that ends up untouched on the plate. If the cap is already close to that, leave it alone. Over trimming is just another way of throwing away meat you already bought. Turn each steak over and inspect the bottom. Any hard connective tissue, ragged edge, or gristle that will never become pleasant on the plate gets cleaned up with shallow cuts. Do not carve deep into muscle just to make the steak look perfect. Butchery is not sculpture. The goal is better eating with as little waste as possible. Once every steak is trimmed, keep the scraps. Usable meat can become a pan snack, stir fry, or ground beef, while hard fat can be saved for rendering. And now comes the part I have been waiting for, counting what $120 bought us. Now, we can answer the question that started this whole job. What does $120 buy when the grocery store does the cutting? And what does the same money buy when you bring home the whole strip loin and do the work yourself? I opened the grocery store packages first and counted the steaks one by one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That was it. 10 New York strip steaks, each cut about 1 inch thick, for the same $120 we spent on the whole loin. Then I turned to the tray we had just cut ourselves and started counting again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 14 steaks from the whole strip loin for the same money. That means our little session at the cutting board gave us 4 additional New York strips without increasing the meat budget at all. And I need to confess something that makes the comparison even more interesting. A few of mine came out thicker than the grocery store steaks. My hands simply do not enjoy cutting New York strips thin. If I had held every piece precisely to that 1 inch target, I probably could have squeezed another steak or two out of the loin, but I would rather show you the result honestly than pretend every slice was laboratory perfect. 4 extra steaks is already the argument. Potentially getting even more only makes the lesson clearer. The savings are not coming from a coupon. They are not coming from buying a lower quality cut. They come from buying the same basic section of the animal before someone else portions it for you. That is the butcher's method behind this whole video. Do one simple layer of work yourself and keep the value that work normally adds to the retail price. Think about what those 4 extra steaks mean in a real household. That can be 4 additional dinners for one person, 2 steak nights for a couple, or part of another family meal sitting in the freezer without another trip to the meat counter. And because you cut the loin yourself, you are not forced to make every steak identical. The grocery store sells what fits its case. You can cut what fits your table. If you like a thick New York strip, make it thick. If somebody in your house wants a thinner portion, make one thinner. If you know you have company coming, leave a larger section whole and cook it as a strip roast instead of turning every inch into individual steaks. That freedom is worth something even before you count the savings. What would you choose? If this loin were yours, more 1 inch steaks, fewer thick steaks, or a mix with part of the loin left as a roast? Tell me below, because the smartest cut plan depends on how your household actually eats. There is another lesson hiding in the comparison. When people see a big vacuum sealed primal at Costco, they often assume it belongs to restaurants, caterers, or somebody with professional equipment. It does not. The job we just did required a stable cutting board, a sharp long knife, paper towels, a bowl for trim, and a tray for finished meat. That is it. A breaking knife is useful because its shape and length make the strokes easier, but a sharp chef's knife can still do the work. The skill is not owning special equipment. The skill is understanding the sequence. Secure the board, open the package cleanly, dry the meat, square the end, decide the thickness before you begin. Score guides if you need them. Use long slicing strokes. Watch for the sirloin end. Then trim each steak according to how you actually want to eat it. Once you have done one loin, the giant package stops looking like a project and starts looking like a stack of steaks that have not been separated yet. That change in how you see the package is where the real savings begin. The paper towels deserve another mention because this is the unglamorous part people leave out when they make butchery look effortless. Whole cryovac pieces are wet. If the board, meat, or your hands are slippery, the job becomes harder and less controlled. Keeping the liquid contained in the opened plastic, lifting the meat onto towels, and drying the exterior makes everything cleaner. And again, that red liquid is not a bag full of blood. It is water and myoglobin released from the muscle. Knowing that does not change the cutting technique, but it does make the package a lot less mysterious the first time you open one. The little end piece you squared off is another example of how a butcher thinks about value. That piece does not need to become trash because it is not shaped like a steak. Cook it as your snack, save it for another dish, or combine useful trim with other scraps. When you buy a whole primal, you paid for everything in the bag. The more of it you can use, the better your real yield becomes. The same applies to the fat. You do not need to strip every ounce from a New York strip. Around a 1/4 inch on the cap gives you a traditional amount that can render and bring flavor. If there is excessive hard fat, trim it. If there is merely a clean, reasonable cap, leave it. A person trimming for his own freezer has an advantage over a retail case because you are not trying to make every steak look identical under bright lights. You are trimming for eating quality. Then remember the connective tissue we remove near the tip. Fat and connective tissue are not the same thing. Good fat can render and enrich the steak. That translucent membrane remains chewy. Learn to tell those apart, and you stop cutting away flavor while leaving behind the very thing that makes a bite unpleasant. This is why I say saving money by cutting meat yourself is not just about making slices. Every primal teaches you how the animal is put together. The top sirloin section appearing near the end of the strip loin is probably the best example from this job. When you own the whole loin, there is no problem with eating that end. Top sirloin is delicious. You bought the entire primal at the whole piece price, so nothing dishonest happened. But when you are shopping pre-cut steaks, that knowledge gives you an advantage. If one package contains a clean New York strip and another contains a steak with that separate round sirloin muscle entering through the seam, yet both cost the same strip price per pound, I know which one I am taking. You should too. You are not insulting sirloin. You are refusing to pay strip money for it. That is exactly the kind of small visual difference people use to learn from the butcher behind the counter. Now you can recognize it yourself. This comparison also explains why I do not like telling people that saving on beef requires eating cuts they do not enjoy. Sometimes the answer is absolutely to learn chuck, brisket, sirloin, or other value cuts. But sometimes you genuinely want New York strip. Fine. Keep eating New York strip. Change the format you buy it in. If your favorite steak is already expensive, the whole primal can be the bridge between giving it up and keeping it in the freezer. You are trading a little time at the cutting board for more portions. That is a much easier trade for many families than replacing every steak they love with something else. And you only have to make that decision once per loin. Spend the time cutting, then you have your individual portions ready for future meals. That is why the title of this lesson is not about buying the cheapest meat in Costco. It is about filling your freezer with the steaks you actually love for less money. Though the method respects preference, the whole point is to make the favorite cut more practical. There's a discipline to the comparison, though. If you want to know whether you truly saved, compare equal dollars and equal thickness. That is why we bought $120 of pre-cut steaks and $120 of whole strip loin. It is why we measured the grocery store steaks at roughly 1 inch and tried to match them. Yet if I had cut 2-inch steaks and then bragged that I got fewer but larger steaks, the count would tell us nothing. If I had compared a sale price primal with premium boutique steaks from another city, the result would be entertaining but not very useful. The cleanest test is the one we just performed. Same money, same basic cut, comparable thickness, count the portions. Grocery store 10, whole loin 14 with a few pieces accidentally thicker than the target. That is the kind of result you can understand without a spreadsheet. There is no need to turn it into complicated butcher arithmetic. 4 additional steaks appeared because we did the cutting ourselves. And if your local price gap is different, your result will be different too. The method is what transfers. Compare the price per pound where you shop, look at the whole primal, look at the pre-cut package, decide whether the difference is worth your time. Some weeks it will be enormous. Some weeks a sale on pre-cut steaks may narrow the gap. A butcher does not fall in love with a rule so much that he stops reading the price tag. He looks at what is in front of him that day. But once you know how easy this job can be, the whole primal becomes an option every time the numbers favor it. And that is the real power. Options. So next time you see that vacuum sealed strip loin at Costco, do not let the size scare you. See the steaks inside it. Count the work, count the price, and decide for yourself. Then tell me what cut you want Marcus to put on the block.